Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow. With me are author Ian Leslie and journalist Nabila Ramdani. Let's take a look at the front pages then, and we'll start with the Guardian this time. It leads for the third day running with more details on its story about covert surveillance by the US government. Today it says the British intelligence agency GCHQ had access to the data gathered on internet users. Well, the Times has the same story, and it says that MPs are demanding that the Home Secretary tells to Parliament how much the government knew about the operation. The Independent also carries the GCHQ story, and it has the picture of the day. Well, we would say that, wouldn't we? The Queen's impromptu, no it wasn't, appearance in the BBC's newsroom on her tour of Broadcasting House. I think we've been planning it for a little while. The Daily Mail says British patients are turning away from the NHS to a private clinic run by Polish doctors. Daily Express claims that figures showing that half of the UK's exports are to non-European Union countries is proof that we don't need to belong to the EU. The Daily Mirror has Coronation Street actor Bill Roache, who appeared in court today on child sex abuse charges, promising to clear his name. And finally, the Daily Telegraph says that new figures reveal how much high earners pay towards the welfare state. So let's begin with The Guardian, which immediately looks rather different, doesn't it, with the banner in the middle of the paper pretty much. Snooping scandal exclusive, as we've said, a third exclusive in a row. It claims UK used Google and Facebook to spy on us. And now Malcolm Rifkind and the Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee asking for some answers sharpish.
It's a massive story. It turns out that the US government has been accessing the records, phone records, and now it turns out internet use records of millions and millions and millions of its citizens. That was broken by this paper, The Guardian, this week. Now the sort of third stage of the story is that there seems to be a deal between British intelligence agencies and American intelligence agencies, enabling them to also access the emails, photos and videos of people without their knowledge. So it turns out that there is this massive sort of undercover snooping operation which none of us knew about.
But it also appears that it was done legally, they're saying, in the United States. Legally, maybe, but not in a transparent way. It wasn't openly done.
I think the legal aspect is also questioned, and that's why it could do long-lasting and indeed irreversible harm to Barack Obama, who came in as, the president keen to protect civil liberties, and he very much put that at the forefront of his agenda. But the story has come to the UK now, and as the Guardian story reveals, in exclusivity, ministers are now put under mounting pressure to explain whether or not they had authorised GCHQ, the UK's eavesdropping agency, to gather intelligence on Britons from internet company in partnership with America's top spy agency.
The GCHQ saying in a statement that it operated within a strict legal and policy framework and took its obligations under the law very seriously, but that's not keeping MPs at bay.
No, and I that's what you would expect them to say. And obviously there are things that they do that they don't want the public to know about for security reasons. And of course, I'm sure that they thought that they had good reasons for doing this. But the fact is that if you have a government or governments looking at the data of millions of ordinary citizens who haven't done anything wrong and aren't suspected of anything, then you're into some very sort of dodgy territory.
And I think only an investigation can reveal whether or not, the legality of GCHQ's spying, and the Home Secretary will come under particular pressure.
It's on the front of the Times as well. Let's take a look at that. It says British spies in secret deal to access US online files. Home Secretary faces Commons grilling. Well, we don't know when that will happen. They're surmising that will be a showdown in the Commons. But Keith Vaz, who is the chairman of the Home Affairs Select Committee, saying that the security services had in effect secured the snooping powers contained in the Communications Data Bill, known as the Snoopers Charter by its critics, a bill that Nick Clegg vetoed, saying it was too illiberal.
Yes, and now it's coming back on the agenda in the wake of the Woolwich attack. this idea that the government should be able to spy more on people, to avoid attacks like that, and indeed preempt such attacks. So it will be back on the agenda for MPs. Keith Vaz said he has been astonished by such revelations, and I'm sure that MPs like him will be pushing for explanations from the government.
And it's the issue of privacy over security, isn't it? We charge the government and all of its organisations and intelligence services with keeping us safe.
Yes.
How much latitude are we prepared to let them have when it comes to our own information?
There was when Barack Obama made his inauguration speech in 2008, he made a very famous kind of rhetorical statement when he said, "We don't need to choose between civil liberties and the security of our nation." It was precisely wrong about that. We do need to choose. And so far, he's chosen security over civil liberties at every stage, including this one. These are difficult questions. You know, obviously, there are dangers out there, and we need to have as much information on what dangerous people are doing as possible. But when it stretches into the surveillance of millions of, so far, you know, hitherto unsuspected and innocent citizens, it starts to get into some very sort of sinister Big Brother territory.
I think what this story reveals more than anything else is the internet age and the indictment of the internet age, and how we post information about ourselves, knowingly or not, on the internet, and how this huge amount of information can be accessed.
It also shows that you know, we've been worrying about Facebook having access to our data, and all the focus has been on whether or not Facebook and Google should have, you know this much about it. Turns out the real problem is governments, actually, you know, and they are the guys who are really kind of scouring the data without us knowing about it. At least with Facebook, you do the deal. You say, okay, you can have my data because you're giving me a free service. When it comes to the government, well, they're just doing it behind our backs. So it sort of puts a whole new take on that whole debate about privacy and civil liberties.
It's the partnership between companies like Google and Yahoo and indeed governments. 98% of these data come from such companies.
And the idea that they're sort of doing these deals behind our back, you know, I don't know if it's true that the executives, you know, Google's. I think Zuckerberg at Facebook has just said, you know, this is the first I knew about it. But just it raises the idea that there are powerful executives at Facebook and Google shaking hands with government.
But is it that, though? Or is it that somewhere in a court somewhere, a judge decides that, yes, these organisations have got to hand over this information? How can they resist that, if that's how it works? If that's how it works.
Well, the PRISM programme appears to have been working back through some sort of agreement, I think, between the government rather than a court order. But the fact that they're doing this without telling us about it, without being open about it, is what makes it so.
And it's been going on for a long time as well, 6 years.
Are we being naive? Shouldn't we suspect?
Well, you know, you always like to think conspiracy theories are rubbish, and then it turns out that one or two of them are not. You know, and you think, well, maybe we're right to be paranoid now and again.
I think people should not be surprised by that kind of stories. I think if the information is online, then surely it is accessible by governments.
Yeah. Let's look at The Independent. And a picture for many people's albums there as the Queen visits our brand new, well, it's pretty new, isn't it? She's officially opened our newsroom today. In the paper review, we were saying at the top that we were going to, that this was all sort of impromptu. I think the visit had been planned for about 6 months, and I don't think it's giving too much away to say that was very well choreographed.
I can't imagine she just sort of popped in and said, I'm coming around in 5 minutes and make sure you have the kettle on.
She did realise that she was standing in a place where people aren't normally allowed to stand, which is excellent because there are signs everywhere saying, don't stand here, you're being shot. And we wanted her to be in shot, but she was, you know, observant enough to realise that those signs normally tell people to keep out of the way. But
I think what people would be fascinated about and what they like about the Queen is the juxtaposition between, you know, the regal, more formal way she acts, but also the way she can act at times and behave, you know, in a quite ordinary manner.
And I'll tell you this as well, Nabila, knowing the Queen's coming, they've all smartened up how they look. I'll tell you, they don't dress like that on a normal day. I'll tell you. I hope they've gone to bed because some of the bosses are standing in the front of that shop. Yeah. Daily Mail, another picture of the Queen in a moment, but first of all, the main story there. Patients shun NHS for clinic run by Polish GPs. This is saying that you can go to this clinic, it'll cost you £70, but it's open 7 days a week, and it gives half-hour appointments, which is 3 times longer than you would normally get. And this particular clinic in West London has 6,000 people on its books already, and it's run by Polish doctors.
It's quite impressive, isn't it? 6,000 Britons. And
Britons,
yes, note
they
Britons.
might not be.
And, well, you know, it's a fine example of the entrepreneurial spirit of immigrants to Britain.
Gap in the market?
And,
well, I agree.
They've seen a gap in the market for a different kind of health service, and they've leapt into it. So it's a kind of a great example of entrepreneurialism.
Yeah, absolutely, and clearly more and more British people are impressed by that. The article says that between 15 and 20% of their patients are British. It's interesting to know the vocabulary, though, used by people who run those clinics. They refer to their patients as customers.
So I think they do, charging them £70 a pop.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it might suggest a gradual privatisation of what should in the end be a universal free healthcare system.
But there's always been an opportunity for private care, and this is just bringing it into the GP's sort of surgery, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. It's a nice alternative to the NHS, and indeed for people who have money, because these clinics do not just offer basic care, but also cosmetic surgery as well, for example.
There's the Queen on the Daily Mail, alone with her thoughts. It says, pensive. The Queen on a visit to the BBC yesterday, because, of course, we all thought that Prince Philip was going to be coming with her. And then Thursday night, it was announced that he was going in for this operation. So there she is, and that's the Daily Mail saying that they think she looks pensive.
Well, they're usually a good double act, aren't they?
They are, yes. The Daily Express, though, has a very different picture of the Queen smiling. Again, this photograph taken here at the BBC. The show must go on, putting on a brave face as Philip has an operation. I mean, he has been in and out of hospital quite a few times over the last year, so she's had to get on with doing things on her own, hasn't she?
Yes, I think somebody asked her at some point how he was, and she said, well, I have no idea.
She said he's not ill.
Did she say that?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. She was not too happy to be asked about.
She wouldn't be, would she? I think it would take quite a nerve to ask her that.
I think that's the.
I think it was John Humphreys, and he's got plenty of nerve.
Yes,
indeed.
But those contrasting photos to show you how much we sort of project our own feelings and emotions onto the Queen in different ways. And that's, you know, she must get used to it. You know, people are constantly trying to read her mind, and of course she's not giving much away. So
no, quite right. I wish I could learn a few of those tricks.
Yeah.
The Daily Telegraph revealed how much you pay towards the benefits bill. This is saying that higher earners have little hope of seeing the money that they pay to the Exchequer repaid in the form of estate pension payments or public services. I suppose that's a surprise, is it? If you earn more, you pay more, and you're cross-subsidising somebody who earns less.
That's right, yeah. That's generally how the welfare system works. But I mean, I think they are seeking to get to provide a little bit more transparency, perhaps, on how the system works and where your money goes and so on. And to that extent, it's a commendable aim. I'm not sure I'm surprised it's a front-page news.
But is it, given that there's an erosion, if that's the right word, of universal benefits, which at one time Labour thought was a good idea because if you pay in and everyone gets a bit out, you're more likely to be happy to keep paying in. If universal benefits are being eroded and people see how much they're paying in and they're getting less and less out, might there be also an erosion of people's willingness to pay in? Yes,
I agree, and especially since even the Labour Party seems to have rethought its policy towards benefits altogether, a complete U-turn, and Ed Miliband is now also suggesting a cap on benefits. So if you ask people to contribute more, but in order to get less out of the system, then I'm sure, people who contribute the most are not going to be terribly happy about
that's what the article says. Conservative ministers hope showing people where their tax goes will make the case to rein in the welfare budget easier. However, there is concern that it will also anger the middle classes once they realise the scale of the contribution they're making. compared with the benefit they receive. But in a way, you don't want to be receiving benefits, do you? You know, middle classes are all about standing on their own 2 feet and getting on with it.
Yes, and it's not like... well, it's not the same as a sort of ordinary savings scheme where you save some money, you get some interest, and then you get it back at the end. It is something that you all pitch into and that you all expect to benefit at some point in your life. But I don't think people see it as a kind of...
But I think with the rise of costs in every department of your life, whether it's, you know, accommodation or education or healthcare, it seems inevitable nowadays to rely on the benefit system, even when you're doing quite well.
I aspire to pay in £1 million a year in tax and to take very little out, but I've got a long way to go.
Yes, good luck with that, Martin.
Thank you. Yes, I've made a start. It's a small start, modest beginnings. But who knows what might happen.
Who knows?
That's the papers for tonight. Thank you to Nabila and to Ian for talking us through the newspapers. We'll do it again tomorrow night, of course, here on BBC News. Stay with us because coming up next is Sports Day.